Fire department has indicated that, in essence, we can either roll with it, or I can kick people out into the hallway. I really don't want to do that, so if the place catches on fire, get the hell out. As quickly as you can, any way you can. One other thing, and then I'll sit down. We've maintained, for the people who haven't been here before, a decorum through all of our previous meetings. And we are going to request that we do the same here tonight. Obviously, there's a lot of strong feelings. We're not going to take abuse. I'm not going to let a brawl or anything ridiculous happen in this room. We've got the police chief here. I see some other big guys that would help me clear the room in case we need to. So, having said that, we'll get started. One other thing, we will entertain public comments at the end. The library kicks us out of here at 9 o'clock. I would ask that the people who get up to speak be reasonably brief. It might be a good idea if we had a representative from the MTA to speak. Would you like to do that? And then we'll entertain public comment after that. Looks like all the committee members are here. Is there any discussion of the meeting minutes from the last meeting? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. I received a piece of information about the presentation we had at the last meeting regarding the Charlemont property that I thought I should pass along. It was passed along to me by a private individual who's got much more familiarity with that piece of land than I do. He indicated to me and provided documentation that there are in fact easements on the back, roughly 40 to 45% of that property. One of them being a parking easement for the adjacent swim club. So the adjacent swim club is allowed to park cars in that area. And in addition to that, that's the area that you see outlined in blue. In addition to that, there is a 20-foot easement along the south property line that gains access to the parking easement area. Given all of that, a 3.2 acre lot goes down to about 1.6 acres. It's cut roughly in half. So that's just for information's sake. For those who were questioning why we don't put the facility at that location. I'm going to ask the rescue director, Sean Thompson, to basically just summarize the space needs again.
I'll do that as quickly as possible.
Yep.
So I think the last time we met, there was some discussion on how we came to the acreage per se, or the square footage. And I think that we should kind of refer to the meeting where Mike McKeon from Castle and Rose was actually here to discuss how we came to that number, the square footage, roughly 24 to 25,000 square feet. And back in this project, when we were starting to talk about public safety facilities, myself, Chief Maris, and the mayor at that time, Dan McKean, we were asked, to find out what we would need for building, and part of that study came out of the Jacobs report, which was referred to by Councilman Lambie. When we were looking initially, there was some discussion as part of that report that buildings or facilities would align with straight up the center of town, as some of you may or may not recall. One station being located roughly where Valley Falls is presently, one to be located in a parcel of land that I believe will be discussing this evening, and then the third being somewhere up on Maple Highway. As Councilman Lambie had suggested last meeting, out of that study came an optimal three-station model, which was provided by Criterion Associates, a gentleman by the name of Travis Miller. So, as we were going through this process, there were a couple options that were offered to us by Castle and Bose, and one of which was a police, fire, and EMS component or a building. And when the chief and myself at the time had approached the two chiefs of the fire districts, that being Chief Brian Giacone and Chief Kenneth Finley, we talked about, the possibility of having all agencies or public service agencies, including administration, being under one roof. And that was brushed aside by one of the chiefs, and at which point we discussed that with then again Mayor Dan McKee, that one party was not interested in doing that, so we came out with an EMS and a police model. Plan B, as we looked at it and we came out with space needs, we realized at that point the space was a little bit excessive, and that, of course, with an excessive amount of space comes a pretty excessive price tag. The initial price tag came to about $14 to $16 million, and we thought that was going to be fiscally irresponsible. And of course, at that time we also discussed with now Finance Director Brian Sylvia, we talked a little bit about the debt service, and Brian has been kind enough to sit in these meetings, or at least one of them, to discuss debt service. So we're told that we really should be thinking about a building that is going to cost the town, somewhere around $12 million. Plan C was then drafted, if you will, and that's how we came to our renderings, and that's how we came to the space needs for that building. That building being somewhere roughly around 24,000 square feet, to the cost of just under $12 million, with the anticipated increase in cost coming from inflation, price of raw materials, etc., to the tune of roughly 3 to 4% on an annual basis. Now, these are numbers that were offered to us by professionals, and of course, I think, last meeting it was thrown out there that, we just came up with this $12 million figure to come up with a $12 million figure, and I think that that statement was, it was inaccurate, in my opinion, and I think we've done our due diligence, and we've done some homework, and we certainly want to be fiscally responsible as far as finding a suitable building or constructing a suitable building for, the police department as well as EMS. Today we're going to talk about one of those parcels of land, I believe. And, welcome for all of you that we've seen in the past. How are you? So it's it's definitely it's one of those things where I just don't want to leave the perception or offer the perception that we haven't done our homework in this project, and we've had a lot of discussion. Clearly, the chief and myself, we've been at each one of these meetings. We've had many meetings. We've had meetings until almost 1 o'clock in the morning at council chambers. Some of that just kind of spilled over into the parking lot. Myself and the chief talking about the project, etc. But it's something that we're looking to have a building constructed that's going to fit the need of the community, right? So, as the chief was quoted last week in the Valley Breeze, this is not about just us having a new building. This is just not about, having something new and fancy. This is about having a community center where people can come and enjoy, the space that's offered that. And I think part of that space needs, we also did we had a study that was done, actually it was a poll, if you will, that was done by Joe Fleming. And during that time, as part of that poll, it was in 2013, in the latter part of 2013, the results came out. There showed some favoritism, obviously, to a public safety facility being built, and it was favorable, very favorable, and obviously, back last November, it was still favorable, hence the reason for the $12.5 million bond. Now, there was also discussion about, where it should go, and, and again, we're here as non-voting members of this committee, if you will, but it's something that I want everybody to take the time to think about location and where we should be. And as Mr. Mutter has suggested, we're just making suggestions. It's not a choice, right? So you don't have the power or authority to do that. He suggests that or he makes reference to it many times. But it's think about our future, think about the vision for, very proud municipal services, and I think that's all I have to say, sir. It wasn't bad.
Thank you, Sean.
I have a question. It says here that you're going to talk about the space needs, and the acreage
Right.
needs. The space needs I completely understand, and
Sure.
but the acreage needs I still don't
My
understand.
apologies.
That's
So
all right.
the acreage, and, at that time, there was discussion about acreage, and, we talked to Mike McCain, and again, I believe he made reference to that in our first meeting, that, and some of the engineers on this committee can certainly, help me out, but there were, when we're looking at parcels of property, it was at least explained to me, and I'm not a builder, I save lives and make a difference that way. But at the end of the day, he explained to us that, there's, when you choose a parcel of land, you choose a specific size in reference to that parcel of land in hopes that you would have X amount of acreage buildable and then additional parcel, I wouldn't say parcels, but portions of that land, you have to take into consideration that could be perceived as waste space. And in that, we do have outbuildings that would be part of your parking lot, and those outbuildings would store signage. For the police department, we would store vehicles, motorcycles, ATVs, by way of example. We have a dive trailer, so that's a part of that. So taking everything into consideration, it was the recommendation at that time that we looked somewhere between 5 to 7, 5 to 10 acres of land, based upon what we were looking at for building. Now, there have been renderings offered of this building, and again, they're just that, they're renderings. So there's not, this is the building that we're going to build. It's a vision that somebody had based upon space needs and tied it into that building, and that's what we're looking at. So at the time, and as Mike McCain made reference to, I don't have the date in front of me of our first meeting, but that being said, the discussion was that we would need anywhere between 5 to 7, 5 to 10 acres.
I don't know. I had sent, and I copied the chairman on a letter, and I went and actually spoke with the mayor, because at our last meeting, we talked about the 6 to 10 acre requirement, and the chairman said that, if that was our charge, that's what the mayor told us we had to do, so if we wanted to do anything different, the mayor had to make that call. I did speak with him, he said he was gonna get back to me. I don't know if your presentation is in response to that, or if I'm still waiting to hear back from him.
No, I think it's, I think we have to contact him.
Well, I didn't know if he asked you.
Yeah, no, I mean, we spoke of this and certainly spoke of the acreage. I don't know if that is actually an answer to your question or the letter that we sent to him, whether we had anything to do with the meeting or not. So I'm not sure.
Well, so then I'm not sure if he's actually answered the question or if he's going to, but I did ask him to either create a functional definition, get rid of the 6 acres altogether, or give us the ability to do a variance or exception policy, so that if we found a space that was not 6 to 10 acres, but still met the other criteria and we felt was viable, that we could recommend it to him. I did ask him that, you've seen the letter, Chairman, and I'm waiting to hear back from him. Thank you.
Any other questions for Sean? Next item on the agenda is the presentation of the town's legal opinion. We have asked, because I've seen what appears to be legal documentation that prohibits building on the land. We asked the town solicitor to give us a legal opinion on those restrictions, and Mr. Hefner is here to do that tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel like Jeff Mutter sitting at the president of the council up here at the table. I want to start off by saying I've been a resident and a taxpayer in the town since 1974, and that'll tie in with what I'm going to be telling you. So, I've also been an attorney since 1978, a trial attorney amongst other things. I've also been the town solicitor for a period of almost 20 years, on and off since 1990. So I've gotten to be familiar with a lot of the issues in the town of Cumberland, and yet I found that the so-called monastery is something that I found to be absolutely amazing, because it all happened back in 1968 and 1972, when a lot of us anyway either weren't living here or weren't paying attention. And I also want to point out, over the years, I've had 13 years at the General Assembly, working in the Legislative Council. And that involves drafting of legislation, research, etc. And I say this only because it comes into play with something else I'm going to say a little bit later. So I've been asked tonight to present some information on what we call a monastery. What's the monastery? What is it? Most taxpayers, at least when this started, had no idea the monastery went all the way up to Angel Road. To most people, the monastery was right here, in the general vicinity of where we're sitting. And I was asked numerous times, what's going on with the monastery? What's the problem with the monastery? Why do we have to put something there? I said, it's going to go across from the post office. You need the post office, it's the monastery. No, the post office, it's across from the post office. Well, what's wrong with that? So that's what I got. And that's what a lot of people think, and probably still think. So how did it all start? In 2004, the town council in the town of Cumberland, for whatever reason, with a new mayor coming in, found it to be beneficial to the town's residents to take some action to protect the monastery from what was perceived to be things that the new mayor was going to bring forward. So because of that, they passed section 28-27 of the ordinances, which basically said there's no more building on the monastery. There's no more asphalt on the monastery. They also passed a conservation and management plan, also a conservation easement, and with restrictive covenants that was recorded and is still recorded. So everything has to be supposedly consistent with what those covenants are. So it leads us to the exact issue of what this document or documents mean, and legally what everything adds up to. When you're looking at real property law, okay, if either of us, any of us in here, own a piece of property, and we put an easement, or we put a restriction, or we put anything at all on record at the sale on that property, and then sell it to another party, that party that buys the property has to take the property subject to the easement. And many of you probably know that. So if a prospective buyer comes along, that person, or his attorney, her attorney, buyer beware, you're going to get what you're paying for, and you're going to do your homework. Now, as an example, when the town acquired the monastery property, it began in 1968. There were two major parcels that were purchased. There was another parcel in 1972, which is where we're sitting now, and those parcels comprise what the monastery property is. So, and when we bought the property, there were actually restrictions and covenants on the property for, I believe, a period of not more than 30 years, which have since expired. There may also be there are a couple of other things that I noticed a couple of years ago, and I have not taken it upon myself or to ask the mayor or the town council to have the real estate attorney look into this, because the presentation tonight is for the town, for me, the council, the mayor, to determine whether this committee wants to consider it. So I'm not going to go out and spend the town's money looking into all these issues, which may not be issues, until after this committee takes a vote. So in the present case, in my opinion, all right, in my opinion, we put these restrictions and covenants on. We still own the property. We can take them off. That's the long and short of it. We can revoke the 2000 or amend the 2004 ordinance. We can take off or amend the management plan. We can amend the actual covenants. But what are we going to do? Kim has, last July or August, Kim has brought up in a memorandum the impact of Chapter 34-39 of the general laws. This was enacted in 1976 by the General Assembly. It's not coincidental that it comes within several years after a couple of cases that Kim mentioned. Many of the pieces of legislation that are passed at the General Assembly are actually things that have happened in response to something else or to a problem that's come up. Every now and then you actually get something that's a new idea or something that's original. Now what Kim said is that because the conservation restrictions and the preservation restrictions were on the property, that we have to somehow get the Attorney General in under another section and make the Attorney General a part of a legal action and essentially have the Attorney General either agree or have a court order that the town can do what I've already suggested we can do without going to court. And the problem with Kim's argument is that when you look at the definitions of a conservation restriction or a preservation restriction, which would trigger the Attorney General's participation, 3439(2) A and B, in both of the definitions, says shall mean a right to prohibit or require a limitation upon or an obligation to perform acts on or with respect to or uses of a land or water area, whether stated in the form of a restriction, easement, covenant, or condition in any deed, will, or other instrument executed by or on behalf of the owner of the area, or in any order of taking, which means a eminent domain, a condemnation proceeding. The preservation restriction has the same language. Now, why is that important? In 1972, in the case of Angel versus City of Newport, which Kim brought up, a private party deeded land to the City of Newport to be forever used and maintained as a public park for free use of the public. Thereafter, Newport sought to and actually leased a portion of the property for erection of a facility used by retarded children. There was a lawsuit. And what happened was the court decided where the use of 1/40th of the land did not constitute a frustration or defeat the intent of the donor's original intent, it was allowed to stay. As a result of this, in other cases, it's my position that 3439 was enacted a couple of years later. Now what we have here, we have not somebody giving us this land. Far from it. We bought this land. And if I can get to it, this actually amazed me because I never knew Ed Hayden, but I knew a lot of him. And I just see his picture every time I come in here at the front door. The land in question came in 3 pieces. Across from the post office. We paid $236,070 for 262 acres. Taxpayer bucks. We then paid $151,200 for another 168 acres. The first of those properties was across from the Diamond Hill to the Lynch Quarry. And then the second parcel, I believe, was the actual property we're talking about now. What I'm referring to, it runs from just north, or includes Nine Man's Misery, and it runs all the way up to Angel Road and out to Diamond Hill Road. The other one goes south of that from Diamond Hill Road all the way over to the Lynch Quarry, and we got the third parcel, which is down over here. The remaining acreage in 1972 is what everybody thinks is the monastery. That's here. 93 acres. We paid 95 acres, $285,000. That's $672,270 in 68 and 1972 bucks. See, Mr. Lambie's over, Councilor Lambie could probably figure that out, what that's worth today. That's a lot of money. In my position, not as the solicitor, my position as the taxpayer, we've got this land that's paid for. Why don't you use it for something, and why don't you use it for what the administrator intended to do when the town bought it, and which had to be approved by the town council? Different things that appeared in the newspapers. When Socket called in Pawtucket Times back in there, the purchases were made to prevent the area from being developed with 200 or more apartments up there. That's one of the first two that I mentioned. Well, they never got built. The purchases were also made for the long-range possibilities for the land, including a town hall, a library, a school for the retarded, and even an ice skating rink. The purchase and sales agreements for all the land contain language that the land could not be used for residential, commercial, or industrial purposes. We're not saying we're going to do that. It could only be used for town accommodations. Those are facts. Those are reported. That's what Ed Hayden decided on buying all this property and put it before the town council because they had to approve it. And that's the reason that all this property was bought. It wasn't bought to keep and just let it sit there. It was bought for those reasons. And I have to say approximately 100,000 of the 672, I think 25,000 was may have been a match from the state, and 75 may have come from what is it, conservation? Conservation? Yeah, Green Acres, I'm sorry. And so as I look at this, I said, you know, to me personal, this is me personally, but I'm basing this on all that I know and all I found out. It's absolutely absurd that the taxpayers of this town, unless somebody's going to come along with a site that is located kind of ideally the way this one is, for no cost, it's absolutely absurd to me that this committee would not even at least consider it. I'm not saying if you approve something tonight to go forward and look into this more. I'm just saying, we're not doing a done deal tonight. I think we just need to look at this seriously, and I want to know how, if I was on the council or I was anywhere, that I'm going to not say we're going to use this land we paid for, which is probably $2 or $3 million worth now, and we're going to go out and spend more money and raise your taxes. Well, I and everyone in here that owns property is already paying money for these purchases because your tax rate back in '68 and your tax rate back in '72 went up to purchase this property. So we're paying for it. Why are we going to pay for it again? It's centrally located near Route 114, Angel Road, 295. And these are my conclusions, and I believe of the administration. And I stand corrected. I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone. The town council, what I'm going to recommend, the town council should take steps to revoke or amend section 28-27 of the Cumberland Code of Ordinances to allow for the immediate construction of the public safety complex and eventually a town hall and a senior center on a site on Diamond Hill Road, north of the power lines, out of Plat 22, Lot 8. The town council shall take immediate steps to cause amendment of the conservation management plan to reflect what I just talked about. The site that I'm referring to, I do not have a meets and bounds description, begins on the northerly side of the existing utility easement abutting Plat 20, Lot 2, northeast to Diamond Hill Road.
Excuse me. That really doesn't mean anything to anyone. We'll get to that.
Okay.
We have actually a map of the potential area I know a lot of people have been waiting to see it,
Is
so
there, all right, this,
I'd like to,
picture's worth 1,000 words, so I didn't know we were gonna have that. But this is generally, I believe, the area that had come up before, back when there was a referendum and then one was pulled out, one got pulled.
Yeah, it was last summer.
Okay, so this basically is generally in the area. And it's the administration's position that everything here is located north of the existing walking trails. You're not gonna be hurting any of those. It's north of Nine Man's Misery. The land that this will be on will not inhibit. We have intentions of putting another walking trail that will take the people down from here all the way to Angel Road eventually, if you wanna go that way. We're not gonna be blocking off the monastery. If this is passed or approved by this commission, I will take and prepare a letter to the Attorney General's office stating all of the facts that or many of the facts that I've referred to tonight. I will send that down and I will say to him or to whoever would handle it, in my opinion, we do not fall under 3439. In my opinion, we're entitled to do what we want to do with this property, as long as it is consistent with the administration of Mr. Hayden and the town councils that were in effect at that time, or in office at that time. It's my position that there is no need to file any suit in Superior Court. However, if the Attorney General decides that there is the need for a filing in Superior Court, I will make sure that we take the proper steps to file it as soon as possible. And I would like the committee here just to think about what I said, to discuss this. If you seek to keep it on a list or make it part of the list, I would suggest that you keep looking at other properties, because at least at that point, if I know you've approved at least considering it, I will take all the other steps that I have to do on behalf of the town and the taxpayers to get this going as soon as possible. That's it. Does any other committee have any questions?
We've been waiting a long time to hear your opinion, and if I heard it correctly, basically what you said is you don't think the conservation easement falls under 34-39-1.
That's correct.
Okay. 34-39-1. 2A applies to a right to prohibit uses of land stated in the form of a restriction, easement, or covenant in any instrument executed by or on behalf of the owner of the land.
That's correct.
In what way does that not apply?
I just stated my reason. I want me to restate it again?
Well,
We did not.
The plain language that I just read applies, and let
me go back. I pointed out in the definition of restrictive covenants or whatever they were, I pointed out that they had to be placed on the property by the person that the town bought it from, got it willed to them from, or somehow through some legal avenue took title to it.
Okay, it doesn't say that. That's how you're interpreting it. It does
That's
not
how
say that.
that's how I interpret it, and the Attorney General can either agree with me or not, so.
Okay, and then if you look at 34-39-4, it says conservation restrictions are interest in real estate, and a document creating such a restriction is deemed a conveyance of real estate and is enforceable.
I
And then,
understand.
if you look at 34-39-3D, the Attorney General, as the guardian of the public interest, can enforce those restrictions himself, regardless of whether or anything else, he can enforce them. So, I still don't understand why you think there has to be some sort of a conveyance. I mean, there are no regulations on the statute. Correct? There's no regulations?
I've already stated what my position is.
Well-
We can argue about this all night, Council,
Well,
okay?
That, the point of your being here tonight, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, the point of your being here tonight was to give an opinion to this committee as to whether or not it was permissible. You gave your opinion, but there's not really any legal reasoning behind it, other than the one thing that you asked. So I'm asking you questions to, other than your bare reading of 34-39-2A, is there anything else that makes you think that you can do what you're saying you can do?
There's no prohibition in there. It does not apply to us. These restrict, the city of Newport case, they took the land from a person, and that person put all the restrictions on the property. So they took it by a deed, or you can take it by a will, or you can take it over here. That kicks in all the rest of what you're talking about, okay? We didn't do that. We bought the land, we put it on ourselves, and we can take it off ourselves. That's my position, based upon that, those two definitions.
The only case that I'm aware of that's actually interpreted this statute is a case that Judge Silverstein decided a couple of years ago, maybe 2012. It's a self-imposed deed restriction in a consent agreement with the DEM, and it was enforced against a bona fide purchaser for value without notice. It was an unrecorded easement.
It's DEM about it, but,
I don't see, the statute says nothing
You
about DEM
you
involved.
asked I was asked to give my opinion. I have. We can argue about this all night long. That's why I'm gonna go to the Attorney General if I have to, and we'll go to court, and we'll have the court decide.
I think that I thought we were gonna have more, my understanding was we were gonna be further developed down that road.
Why would I do that when this committee hasn't even considered whether this is a site that they would consider? So I'm not gonna waste my time in the town's money.
Considering, the committee held on, Mr. Chairman, I don't wanna speak for the committee, but my understanding from our past meetings was the committee held off considering this parcel for the sole purpose of making sure that it was legally permissible to build on this site.
Well, it is what it is. No one's told me that I had to do all of this. I would have come up with my same conclusions tonight. So what's your point? I'm saying to you that it may have to go to the Attorney General's office. It may have to go to Superior Court. What more do you want me to say? You want me to take it to court first and then come in and say, and then you'll turn it down and say we don't want to put it there
No,
anymore?
I actually thought that you
Okay.
had, I had been told, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, that, some discussions had been had with the Attorney General's office. So my understanding was, when you were gonna come today, was that you had some either informal or formal decision by the Attorney
And
General.
I told
as
you
to
this
the
morning that I did
Well, I
not
know
have,
that.
so now you're bringing
As
it
of
up
this
again.
morning.
So I told you this morning, no, I did not, nor do I know if the mayor did, nor would I have, unless I knew the committee wanted to consider this.
Well, I mean, you did tell me this morning, I actually asked, when I found out your presentation was gonna be on the agenda tonight, I asked 2 weeks ago to have more of a sort of preview of what you were going to say, so we could have a full and fair discussion of this issue. Get all the issues out on the table, all the legal issues, so that the committee could decide whether or not they felt that the site should go on, whether it was legally permissible.
And we would have been arguing about the same thing. I don't understand. I'm here representing all of the taxpayers and all of the town residents. I'm not here representing the people that may live next to the monastery. I'm here representing all of the taxpayers and all of the residents of the town of Cumberland, okay?
No, you represent
And you
corporations,
can
that's what
say,
you're
and you can say
representing.
what you want. Excuse me. But I am here representing everyone, not the people that live down here. I'm not
It's on my way to
naive.
say
I've been
something.
around for a while.
No, don't tell me so.
I didn't say anything to you.
We have alternative
No, I was talking to him.
theories still. I mean, I feel like we're basically at the exact same point as we were in July of 2014. I don't feel like we've made any progress on the legal issue between now and this meeting. I don't know if the committee, how the committee feels. I have no additional comfort as to whether or not it's legally permissible to build on the monastery. I feel exactly the same way I did last summer, which is that it is not legally permissible. And I do have a presentation, but I'm not gonna, I don't know how you feel about that, Mr. Chairman, to go through my legal analysis of why I think it is not permissible. But it comes down to the same thing.
Is that, and again, I don't mean to, you know, poo-poo your desire to speak. If you two get into a legal battle, I don't think it means anything to the rest of us in the room. I didn't expect a decision from the Attorney General when Mr. Hefner showed up. I expected him to render an opinion. Would it be nice if all of this had been done before? Yeah, I suppose it would have been nice if all of this had been done before. But we have the person who's represented the town of Cumberland for however many years. We asked him for a legal opinion, he's provided it. I know there's a lot of people that don't like it, and I don't suspect that this is the end of it, but I'm not sure presentation of, you know, legal arguments does any of us a whole lot of good.
That's fine, Chairman. I just want to make it clear that if in light of the lack of any support beyond what we already heard last summer as far as what the legal permissibility is, it's unlikely that if we recommended the site out to the mayor and it was decided that the site would be the site, that it would be built on without any sort of litigation. It is unlikely, if not impossible, that it would be built on without litigation. So we have to take that into account. If we need to get the site done by June 15th and everybody wants to move forward, we need to take into account the delay and the cost of a potential litigation as to whether this site is a permissible site.
Personally, I would love nothing more than to find an alternate location for this. So far, we have not come up with a whole lot of good options, as you're aware. Are there any other, we'll take public comment later, please.
So I got a question for Mr. Hefner. Is he leaving?
No, you don't have a question for Mr. Hefner.
Is he leaving?
Are you
They
leaving?
just want to know if he's staying for
You
later.
stay around.
Oh, all right, I'll ask you when it's public
Ask me
comment.
right
Okay,
outside.
I thought he was leaving.
You ask me right out here.
Any
I'd
other,
rather do
que-
it in front.
I
Fine.
understand, yeah, I can understand.
any other questions from the committee?
Last meeting, they brought up that the water department owned property inside the monastery property, inside the conservation easement. It was my question that night, that is the town council able to restrict property that the water department, a separate entity from the town, is that, in your opinion, is that legally permissible to put a conservation easement with the coast? The one that, obviously, I put on in '04 with my colleagues, in your opinion, is that legally permissible?
You can, like I said, you can put it on. And you
Even
can,
on-
and you can take it off. I think that parcel is merged in with, 22-8, I'm not sure, Jeff.
No, my point is that it wasn't owned by, it's owned by the water department. So, it wouldn't matter?
The water department is part of the town of Cumberland.
Okay, so that's, just making sure.
They're listed,
Why would-
they're
yeah, why
listed
would they list
differently
it
on
as the
the,
water department?
That I don't know that. I
It's
believe
listed
it's,
differently as the ownership, but the plat and lot is still included in the 2004 conservation easement and management
Mr.
plan.
Chairman?
Right, but just my, excuse me, sorry, but my point would be, I understand that it is. My point is, should it have been? Should it have been allowed to be part of the conservation? I know it is, I know we did it, but would that hold up because it was owned by the water department? Should we have had to exclude it, basically?
I'd have to look at the deeds, and I can't understand how the water department, a department of the town of Cumberland could legally own something that the town's taxpayers would pay for, so I don't have an answer.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question. I apologize, it's a technical legal question for Mr. Hefner. Is the reason that you feel that the 3439 doesn't apply, that the town is both the owner and the beneficiary of the easement? Is that the reason?
I think I've already explained that.
Well, is it?
I've already explained that the definitions of those two phrases that I gave means that there had to be a deed, a will, or other instrument from another party into the town to fall within the rest of the provisions of that chapter.
So it's not because the town owns both the beneficial and the legal title?
It's the same thing. We own the same, we own the property.
The reason I bring that up is that the statute explicitly says that the enforceability of a conservation restriction, the doctrine of merger does not apply. It's completely valueless as far as that goes, and so if that's the reliance, if that's the reason why you're saying that, the statute specifically says that that does not apply.
You want me to say that I've already given
I
you my
don't know,
reasons?
because I don't have any legal opinions, and you just sort of said it didn't apply, I
You
don't
just got a
understand.
legal opinion. That's what Tom is here for tonight. It's an opinion that not everybody in this room may like, but as Tom said, he offered an opinion in what he thought was the best interest of the entire town of Cumberland and its citizens. And like a lot of legal opinions from the courts, we don't always agree with them. And if you don't agree with Tom's opinion, there's no sense tonight sitting here, you constantly debating him.
The whole point of him being here is for us to discuss his legal opinion. And since I give legal opinions, that's my job, I'm telling you that I don't think I've received a legal opinion. I've received a statement, and I'm trying to find out the legal basis for the statement. I think that's perfectly reasonable and rational.
Unless I gave
I'm the only lawyer here.
unless
No,
I
I'm
gave,
not. You-
unless I gave a legal
You should
opinion
help me
that
out
you
here.
totally agreed with, you wouldn't agree that that's a legal opinion. Okay,
That's
so
not true.
well,
That is
then-
not
no,
true.
please, come on.
No, that's not true, Tom. That's not true at all. I'm trying to figure out, since it doesn't say anywhere in that definition that there has to be a transaction between two separate parties, I'm trying to figure out why you think there does have to be a transaction.
So you mean I could, if I deed it to myself? I mean, I'm not following you. And I'm not gonna get off what I said. That's the reason I gave, and the city of Newport case, you brought it up. The city of Newport case, they got land from an outside party, a third party. They bought the land. That's how this chapter, in my opinion, came on the books. Okay? That's how the State House works. That's how legislation gets passed. We gotta fix this so it doesn't happen again. We can't have this happening again. We don't want a school for retarded kids, or whatever it was.
When
Mentally disabled,
When-
retarded.
the most recent, and the only interpretation of the statute says that, you know what, it doesn't even matter, you're not gonna listen to what I'm saying. Thank you. I disagree with you. I believe that we should have an independent opinion, especially since Mr. Hefner drafted the conservation restriction, and the question that's come up as to whether and the extent of its enforceability and whether it was what the town council intended or not it comes right back to his doorstep. I think we should have a more
Well, I would
independent
suggest that the Attorney General, according to your chapter, would be the one to give
I
that
agree,
opinion.
and that's
How
why
about that?
I agree with you 100%.
How about that?
That's why I
what
thought you had already gone and talked
That's
to him
what I
about it.
suggested tonight. You're not listening to me. You got
I-
tunnel vision.
He hasn't listened to me.
All right.
That's, I take exception to that.
I said if this
Not
committee,
Tom,
if
you,
this
Tom.
committee votes to consider this, that's gonna be my next step.
I agree. So I think we all just need to keep in touch. We haven't even talked about ledge, wetlands, any other kinds of issues with this property. But on top of all those things, we need to keep in mind that this property will go to litigation with the attendant delay in cost. So
Yeah.
that's all I'm gonna say about it.
Any other discussions from the committee? Any other questions?
I just want to, for clarification, a non-lawyer person. Your disagreement boils down to one interpretation of one statute.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it does.
My logic says that's a fairly narrow question, and I'm wondering how quickly we could get an opinion to settle this thing.
Leave it to the Attorney General?
I think that's a discussion we need to have with the committee,
Okay.
and I would be happy to do that on the committee's behalf.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to get more clarification on that water department piece of land. I'm looking at the GIS maps here for the town of Cumberland, and that's clearly defined as its own property. Now, I realize that it's a town of
Palomino
Cumberland.
Drive?
Palomino Drive, 21 Palomino Drive. It doesn't look like it's part of the monastery property, although it obviously abuts it, so unless it's changed, our GIS maps show that it's 25 acres off of Cumberland Monastery.
You can look into that for you.
But you said it's part of the monastery.
It's part of the
It's written in
restrictions. It's written, yes, it's written in the conservation easement and management plan. The plat and lot is for the water department land is included.
And then
So as far
I
as
would
the-
go back to Jeff's question.
Yeah.
Can that actually happen?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask you a question about the drop zone property, Mr. Hunter?
Yeah.
You had indicated that there was an easement, not a conservation easement, but a parking easement on that property. Is that an easement that we can get out of as well?
I'm sorry, which is,
The parking easement on the drop zone, is that something that we can, that's something I assume we imposed on the property, can we get rid of it as well?
why would you assume we imposed that on the
I'm
property?
asking, I don't
We
know,
just
I
said
didn't
we
see,
assume,
I didn't see the easement, I just heard
I
the
would think the
chairman
swim
report
club
it.
imposed that on the town when they purchased, or when the town purchased that.
that was a lawsuit that started between the prior owners of the original Lamont Civic Center building and the Lamont Swim Club. There was a long-standing feud in Superior Court, and that's how it came about. You got you got a quarter of the property in the back wetlands, you got a quarter of the property in the back that's a permanent parking easement for 4 or 5 months a year, and you've also got a 18 or 20-foot wide easement from Mendon Road back to the parking easement. So you end up with 1.5, 1.6 acres that you could use in the front subject to the 18-foot easement. So that was something that we inherited, and we refined it.
Yes.
So on the, so is it procedurally, so the next, are you to go to the next item on the agenda here? Is that the plan to go to number 5?
I'll tell you what I had in mind. At first, when we started this, I thought we were looking for a single piece of property. I was a little bit surprised when the mayor said make a recommendation for 3 or 4. We've had enough trouble finding one piece of one, never mind 3 or 4. So I personally would like to see us make a recommendation on 3 or 4 parcels of land, and I'm still hoping we can do that. One of them, I suspect, is going to be voted on here short.
Well, so is it,
And-
so tonight, is the intent of the committee tonight to actually put forward some suggestions, or do we have another meeting?
We have 2 more meetings, I
Yeah,
think.
to continue it to the next meeting.
So, I mean, I think it's, though we don't have a budget, and as I've said all along, I mean, you know, we don't have any power per se, but we have, I do think we have the ability to make a motion to send to the administration that we want some interaction with the Attorney General on this site. And I'd like to add the Water Department site as a legal opinion on whether or not when the town council took the action in '04, which, remember, I was there when, I led the charge to take that action, but I know that that was, you know, owned by the Water Department. God knows I didn't know, okay? It was a question of the whole thing. So I think it's important that we get a legal opinion on whether or not that action was allowable on that piece, because if it wasn't, then now you're on there's a different discussion. I think there's a different discussion.
I'm thinking there's got to be some relationship between those 2 parcels of land, given the fact that the water tank straddles.
So
the
why
property line.
why did it say the town water department, whereas the rest of the property didn't say?
The water department is separate legal entity? No?
All right, so maybe you answer that one easily, and that one goes out the window.
There should be no reason why they're listed as an owner, but
But they are
I want to
listed.
look into it. I think it is merged with Lot 22, Lot 8.
So my feeling is that I would like to see us, I know it's this chicken and the egg thing that's going on here, but, I would like to see us get a stronger opinion on that, the town water department and how that conservation easement goes related to that, and on whether or not, some sort of, whatever we could get the administration to come back with from the Attorney General's office on the legislation that was passed in '04. I think we do need, because I'm not afraid of litigation, that never, you know, I would have problems suggesting the site with the thought that, well, there may be litigation. That's always a possibility no matter what you do, so that wouldn't worry me. But why, if we got information that said, yeah, I think you have a really high hurdle to overcome, I think you could attain that. I think the administration could attain an opinion along those lines. Because then at that point in time, we've got a lot of work to do to fix on the other properties. That's always going to be sitting there. I think that's my colleague's point here, is that it's either not a big legal hurdle to overcome, but a big public political hurdle to overcome, or it's just not, or it's a very small legal hurdle, and there are other things that could be done, you know, in my opinion, to potentially make it more palatable. But I think right now, to not know, I would never suggest this property without having a little stronger feeling on whether or not what we did in '04 is as airtight as it may or may not be. So you know, what I'm saying is for the committee, and that's what I mean, I don't know about the procedure, but I'm gonna move that the committee ask the administration to get a stronger legal opinion on the water department property that's inside the conservation easement, how the council's actions in '04 may or may not be relevant, and something a little stronger from that they can get from the Attorney General on the statute 3439.
I'll second
Move that.
I'll second.
What, the only concern I don't have a concern doing that, or I should say, my only concern doing that would be if we don't get anything back from them, and it is the state, I don't mean to offend anybody, but if we don't get anything, you know, indicative of, you know, which way they lean back in time, I don't think we can ignore this.
My feeling on that, once again, would be only my own personal opinion. I mean, then it doesn't get considered. I think that they should offer an opinion. I mean, I think if the administration, the mayor, and the administration goes to the Attorney General on an issue like this, for public safety topics, and they can't get an answer, I'd say, okay, I'd be against it.
We got the chicken and the egg. You want us to now go, I was gonna say, give us the okay to go look into this, and now you're saying you want us to see if we can look into it before you're gonna give us the okay to whatever, so.
Yeah, I absolutely,
Okay.
I'm not a person. I honestly do not feel that. This is a board that was appointed by the mayor with absolutely no budget. You know, so there's no funding, we don't have any legal standing. We could give 5 locations and say, I don't like any of them, and do something else, and that's perfectly permissible. We are only a site selection committee. How can I look at a site I don't know is in play? So, even if it is in play, there's so much to this property, so much of the history of the property that I still believe, you know, I may be a dinosaur, but I still believe there's a middle ground that makes sense to most people, not to everyone, but if what we did in '04 protects that to perpetuity, I can live with that, Mr. Hefner. I can still live with that, okay. But if it doesn't, because you know that I've had a problem with how on a Wednesday night, how can 7 people, when the rest of the town doesn't even know, lock up 525 acres? I wouldn't want to give my town council that opportunity to do it again someday. They're just going to lock up every piece of property? So here's another, so it's good for everyone to find out, because maybe we don't let it happen again if it was the wrong thing to do. Anyway, the only thing this committee can do is make a motion, second, and vote something, and then we see what happens. Everything else, you know, isn't all that, we're not all that strong, so I say we send it.
What Eddie Hayden's thinking about that.
So Since
Not
we've-
here.
Since we've tabled sites in the past simply because somebody sold them with the idea that they would be conservation, we thought that they were conservation, they had absolutely no restrictions on them legally, but they were intended for conservation, totally support Jeff's
We
motion.
don't
Find
know.
out because that's what we were trying to find out tonight. What does this conservation easement mean, and does it actually legally restrict building on the property? Which is, by the way, since I didn't get to make my whole presentation, exactly what it says. It says in perpetuity, and the following are expressly prohibited: cutting trees, making any parking lots, building any buildings that were not there since 2004. Expressly prohibited in perpetuity. It had to mean something.
Moving
So, Chairman, can I make a
Yes.
clarification, since that's kind of what I do? I attempt to do it from time to time. Maybe I'll be wrong, I don't know. So from the beginning of this process, we had stated, I believe the mayor had stated at the first meeting, that the town would give its legal opinion on whether or not the monastery could be built upon, and that opinion would be given to the committee for its consideration, so that the committee could decide whether or not they want to eventually, at the end, recommend it as one of the sites, and give that to the mayor, along with hopefully multiple sites. We have a few others that are already, looks like they're gonna be recommended, they're still on the table. So I think tonight, you've had an attempt at one motion, and maybe another, one, to ask the town to see if they can get an attorney general's opinion before the end of this process, before the committee makes its recommendation to the mayor in June. And perhaps tonight, just a motion to continue this site to the next meeting, just like we've done with the other sites that the committee has not tabled or dropped from review. That's kind of what I see going on. That's what I think led up to where we are tonight, having our town solicitor, Mr. Tom Hefner, state his opinion that he believes the restriction can be lifted. And given that information, that's kind of where we are. And certainly, as I stated before, you can ask for another, opinion that the Attorney General may or may not give us before the June 15th deadline. So that's my interpretation of where we are.
I absolutely agree with that interpretation. You built the motion. If enough people say, well, I want to wait for it, then that wins. And if they don't, then you move on without it winning, and you move on to the next thing. You take another motion. I don't disagree with anything Josh said.
So the motion, as I guess I've heard it, is that we leave it on the table and request additional clarification from...
Well, my motion, no, I didn't say it because if the motion was to fail, then I would might have a different feeling on leaving it on the table or whatever. So my motion is just strictly to have the committee send, a request to the administration for an opinion on whether or not the property listed as owned by the water department was legally included in the conservation easement of 04. And then secondly, it's going to some sort of litmus test from the attorney general on 44, 39. That's strictly my motion. Because if it was failed, I have a motion on the other thing. So I'm not gonna, I don't want to tie them together. That's strictly my motion.
And again, if we don't get that before this process ends...
The committee could vote that down. That should be part of the consideration of the committee when they entertain the motion.
I certainly don't have a problem getting, hopefully, a more concise clarification from whoever this thing would end up in front of. I also don't want to eliminate it as a site, and I suspect your motion doesn't do that. So we have a motion and we have you second?
I see.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hand vote, ayes?
Motion passes unanimously. And do we need another motion to continue to cite the monastery for consideration at the next meeting?
I don't think there's anything that we've said that prohibits us from doing that 2 weeks from now. And if there is, that's certainly not my intention anyway. So,
I only state that because it's been the past practice for all the pieces of land we've looked at to either vote it down, tabling it for further consideration, or continuing it for consideration.
to continue with
we have a motion to continue for consideration the monastery property. We have a second. All in favor? Aye. Again,
That should be at the May 26th meeting.
So we have two things we can do now. We can either move on to other properties, or I've seen some comments on the paper that some people don't have a clue as to where we're talking about putting this thing. So I ended up preparing a few graphics. This one that Josh just had open is actually from the monastery's website, and what I did was I took the wetlands and outlined them and colored them in nice and blue so everybody can see them. So the monastery land is outlined by the green border, and actually that goes, and then on the monastery website it includes the water department property. So you can see the library down towards the bottom of the page, and it, obviously the monastery continues even further south than that. I used the same basis of criteria for the wetlands that we've used for all of the other properties as far as where they're located. And one thing we've all come to learn is that wetlands aren't wetlands until DEM says they're wetlands. So that is best guess right now, and again, it's the same criteria we've used for every other piece of property we've looked at.
John, could you point to the part of the property that is being considered?
I'll get to
Yeah, we have a couple more maps that are a little more clear.
The preliminary walking trails are also on here. That's the dashed yellowish lines. Secondary walking trails are also located on here. Access paths to walking trails are located on here. I have some 24 by 36 prints of this in color if anybody is interested a little bit later.
I'm just gonna point something out here real quick. It's a little hard to see. Town maintained trails are all the yellow ones here. Many of you probably know that. Non-town maintained, or they're kind of trails, kind of not trails, are the ones over here. Really is concerned with the ones that are, the ones that are kind of used and maintained by the town, which are the yellow ones. None of the walking trails go north of the power lines.
So I was just curious to find out where the wetlands are on this property, because Lord knows we've had enough problems with wetlands on other pieces of property. So again, the areas colored in blue are the wetlands on this piece of property, and as we can see, the area up near Angel Road would certainly be, at least to me, problematic. I'll go to this one. Sorry. Yeah, I'll be a little. So this is, again, from the property information. And just a disclaimer, before Josh blows that up any further, it comes to I don't know, 13.76 acres. Doesn't mean we're advocating 13.76 acres, doesn't mean that the town plans on taking 13.76 meters. I went back and I referenced the wetlands map. I tried to leave us a buffer from where those wetlands were. I tried
Move
to
to
stay
the reference desk, please. Move to the reference desk.
tried to stay far enough off the power line so that nobody blows. And that is basically what I consider to be the buildable area. I think almost everywhere else on this property presents issues, either with wetlands or just being so far off the road that it becomes unachievable. The building right across the street from that red blotch is the post office. So for the people who have been less than sure where this thing was originally planned, it's in that area. There is a gas line going through there. There's a right-of-way or an easement, I'm not sure what to call it, for the power lines.
And this is generally the area we presented last summer, when the town presented this. Not exactly the same, but roughly the same area. You had one more, right? That's just the one.
Yeah, I mean, this was the information that I transposed to the monastery website map. So, all right. I guess that's it. We're going to move on to sites continued from the previous meeting. One of them being the National Grid property. Is there any update?
I have no update on that from what I gave at the last meeting.
The library will be closing in 15 minutes. If you have any items that need to be checked out, please bring them to the circulation desk at this time. No items can be checked out after 8 o'clock. Thank you.
I make a motion that we continue the National Grid property for discussion at subsequent meetings.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
Sure sounds that way.
533, lots 188 and 158 off Mendon Road.
That's the lot at the end of Lambert property?
Yep.
You walked that, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell everybody in the room, because there's many more people here tonight than previous meetings, what your findings were?
You get that?
Do you want? Yeah, I can pull it up. Yeah. I'm just gonna go back a few.
Dump?
Back a few. See if I can get a map on it.
I think it might be front and back.
I think you're right. 24th maybe.
Right there. These are two lots just, actually, I was gonna say north, but it's mostly west, I guess, of the House of Pizza.
It's the high school, right?
They are accessed through largely residential neighborhoods. So one of the lots we're looking at is where the hand is, and that's kind of in a regular shape. As you can see, there's wet areas well into that lot from the front to the back. The adjacent one is the second lot, and there is certainly buildable land in, again, where the hand is. That is accessed through streets with 4 or 5 houses on it. It's not the preferred way to get into the complex, but lacking a whole lot of better options, we left it on the list, and I would make.
For all of the streets, all of this, I thought there an industrial street now, I haven't walked the property. Are all the streets in residential neighborhoods, all the
Can
ones you
you-
can see?
No.
No, but the main access points to the land that are built we're going through residential here and then residential and commercial here.
What's the next one?
The streets that you see in the
I
black
know some of them are
outline there,
paper.
yeah,
Yeah.
they don't really exist.
Yep. No, I understand that.
Try and get to the aerial photography.
I just thought one of them was in, so more of a industrial type.
It is,
There's still a couple of houses that face amended.
Couple of houses.
Yeah. right, I think they actually,
They face it.
yeah, face them.
Just take that fry very slow completely. We'll get there. Where is it on there? That's town land over there. It's all town land. So right here basically. So yeah, basically.
So right above the 122, I'm not Rhode, maybe,
Yeah.
the name of that street? There's a couple of,
Yeah.
there's a landscaper there and a contractor, I believe, on the left-hand side. And there's a house, one house, I believe, on the right, and then some offices on the right. So that would certainly be a way in. The street to the north of it, which ends at that white dash right now, that's probably 4 or 5 houses on it.
It's roughly 50 acres in total.
We talked at the last meeting about potentially combining lots, because I'm not sure that you're not going to get a whole lot of good area by using one or the other, so. Unless anybody has any objections, I'd like to continue them for consideration. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Nobody opposed?
The site submitted a proposed for committee review. I have not received anything in the last 2 weeks. I would be happy to entertain suggestions, preferably that we haven't heard before in some way, shape, or form.
Josh, the mayor had said, I don't know if it was the last meeting or the meeting before, that he had some discussions and he was gonna share with us his discussions.
He has not progressed on any of those. There are a couple prior property owners that he's trying to reach out to that haven't, it hasn't really panned out yet. That's what he's told me and the chairman. If it does pan out and there is interest, we'll bring it before the committee. But as of this time, it has not. I wish that was not the case, but certainly that's several private property owners that, until they really have talked to the mayor and said it's okay for the committee to review, that hasn't been the case yet.
Some of those are known to us, others aren't, because, I mean, I've had a person approach me and offer up his property, but given the fact that he has tenants, he prefers for it not to be made public yet, so I don't know what to do about that.
I'm just concerned that we're hurtling towards our deadline, and we haven't heard those ones yet.
We are. I mean, I believe we've talked about the property on Angel Road. I know he's still trying to make contact. That's really not on the list that we're carrying forward. I think at some point in time, if we don't get an indication one way or another, we should put it on the list. We can do that at the next meeting. I don't know what else to do about it. Other sites for consideration at future meetings. Somebody had a hand up? Yes. Could you identify yourself, please?
This is Vine Smith. I had previously asked Joshua to see about putting on your list as possible site would be incorporation of the police station and Garvin Elementary School. I mentioned that because twice I've read in the newspaper that the governor is releasing the moratorium on building schools. Given that we built on Kurdiski Ford Park, a charter school, in a small size lot, I would think that you guys could build at the current location where the police station is, incorporate Garvin, and find a lot less than 10 acres for a new school. So I would like that to be on your list of sites to evaluate, as I've requested this in the past.
Do we make a,
So we've actually had several, we had several proposals for this property already come before the committee, essentially with the same concept as far as building on the existing site or just to the, I think it's the southwest of the school property. That was reviewed at an earlier meeting and the committee decided that it wasn't feasible.
But I'm saying that it is, if the government is releasing a moratorium on building new schools, so it should be considered.
I'm not prepared to put something on a list that we present to the mayor that has an existing school that, I don't know how many hundreds of children attend. I don't know how anybody else feels, but.
You're talking about building 2 buildings now, not just one.
Yes, you would.
The governor
So
is releasing a moratorium, but you still have to pay for it.
Right.
So that would mean we would have to put up 2 buildings.
I just want to add another note too, in my research. Another municipality elsewhere, and it's vaccinating questions, said that their officers patrol more than 50% of the time, and the relevance of the safety complex location has no bearing as to where it should be. So I just wanted to keep that in perspective. And another thing I'm curious to know is,
The library will be closing in 4
It should
minutes.
be had
Please bring your
in
final
the
collections
complex.
to the circulation desk to be
rendering
checked
and
out.
comprehensive
No
plan
items can be checked out after 8 o'clock.
shows
Thank you.
3 bays for, say, your ATVs, your boat for rescues, and maybe a fire engine too. I'd like to know which fire station you're gonna be closing,
Excuse me.
because we're not addressing
Can
that.
I interrupt for a minute? There is no fire apparatus at this station.
Well, I'm just saying the rendering in the comprehensive plan draft shows 3 bays.
I'd like everybody to please ignore the work that Castle Booze has done, aside from the space criteria that, I mean, everybody's looking at the plans and the elevations of that building like it's set in stone.
I realize
And-
it's not, but then I want to know, is the safety complex just going to be a police station, or is it going to be a police station and a rescue, fire,
My
whatever?
understanding of the safety complex, the way it was described to us by the mayor when he laid out the criteria for this, is that it's Cumberland Police and Rescue Services, EMS. That's it.
All right, with that being said, then we have a rescue at Valley Falls. Why do we need 2 rescue vehicles on the same street?
Nobody's saying we need 2 rescues at this location.
Well, not at the location, but on the same street, which is less than a mile. So the rationale of having 2 rescues, I mean, are you gonna be closing the one next to the Cumberland Fire District? Because, I mean, where's that rescue gonna be coming from? Valley Falls, or is it coming from?
That's up to Sean to
You'll have a
decide.
rescue at Valley Falls, and have one in Lonsdale.
Right, currently.
Those would be one at the right now, and those, what's that makes it allowed.
No, we're not in public comments yet. Sites.
Site number 7.
Are there any other sites for consideration?
Yeah. I want to add one to the list. As of this moment, the next meeting, J.H. Lynch and Sons is going to make a proposal of a piece of property that butts the monastery. So we just want to get on the agenda.
Okay.
believe I have some of that information, but if you want to send it to me again for the next meeting, that would be great.
Does that property have access to a main road?
That's what the next meeting's about.
I don't know what
That
property it
just,
is.
that'll come to
That'll-
light at the next meeting.
Yeah, we'll get our package.
Sounds good.
We've gotten to the public comments portion of our program tonight. Jane, would you write very eloquently. I figured the same way. Are you interested in making a presentation for the MPA?
Well, I don't plan on speaking on behalf of the MPA,
Okay.
but I do have some questions that I think are representative of what many people would like to answer.
The library is now closed.
So if I can
We
just.
still have an hour, by the way. Just for those that don't know, we're going until 9 o'clock. This isn't closed yet. I think we just want to make sure, I know there's a lot of people that want to talk tonight, so we have about an hour for public comment, and as this goes along, I think if you keep your comments as brief as possible, as many people as possible will get to say their piece.
Okay, I have a few things to address. The first is Mr. Hefner still here? Okay. I had a question for him, and maybe I can ask this up the committee and you can have an answer for us. He said, with respect to the 2004 conservation easement that covers the monastery land, that we put it on ourselves, in the town. We put it on ourselves, which means we can take it off. And my question is, who is we? Is it the 7 men in the room who
No.
did that? Is it the town of Cumberland?
I would assume that he
All right,
meant
and
the town.
what is the town of Cumberland? Who represents the town of Cumberland? Is it not the taxpayers?
We the people.
It's just a question that I think should be answered.
We the people.
We've had that. I mean, the people who put the restriction on were 7 people. I'm not sure they were all males. You said 7 males, but they may have been. I honestly don't remember, but that's part of my point.
Okay.
There were 7 people.
There's 7 elected
Representatives,
representatives,
right.
and there were notices, and the fact that people don't show up to meetings, maybe that what everybody should take away from this is pay attention.
I guess
go
I'm not
to
gonna get the
meetings.
answer.
Sorry,
No.
but
There you go.
I mean, you said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You were gonna infer what you're saying, you're interpreting before I even say it.
Well, you've already said before, but go ahead, I'm sorry, I do apologize for cutting you off.
I'm good.
I would assume it's the combination of the mayor and the town council. It's certainly not us.
The mayor had nothing to do with it.
Okay, then it's
It
the
was
town
action of
council.
The 7 elected officials at a town council meeting.
Okay,
About the
but
people.
let's talk about now. I'm asking who is the town.
I can't answer that question.
Okay, can we get it answered? Maybe Steve should tell us.
It's everybody in the town, whether they're here or not.
We can't hear you, Jane.
Sorry?
I said it would be everybody in the,
Oh, okay.
it would be everybody in the town, whether they're here or not.
I would assume
This is
since
the
it
town
was
of Cumberland.
imposed by a town council, they would be the ones to change it.
So that sounds.
Makes sense to me.
We need to vote on it. Okay.
I don't know, Tracy.
All right, I'm gonna move on then. If the land were to be taken by the town, in the slim amount that happens, how will it change the tax exempt status of the monastery? Because the town, we taxpayers do not pay any taxes on that property right now, and so if a good portion of the north side is taken, how will it affect the status?
It won't.
No, it's a town
Because it would be
department.
the town would own it before and after.
Town's account.
But they have an exemption on this property because it is designated as open space.
No,
So
that-
if we put a commercial building on it or a municipal building on it.
Well, commercial building would be different.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about commercial building. I think the tax exemption is because the town owns it.
Correct.
What, anything the town owns.
Let's get out the public.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Just an observation that I'd like to make to clarify something that Josh said about the northern part of the monastery when he showed the map of the trails, the trail map, that there are actually trails in the northern part of the monastery. Many of us walk those trails, it's just that the trails are not mapped out on that specific map.
The only difference I was pointing out, Jane, is that there's town-maintained trail systems and trail systems that are just beaten by whoever, and they're not really recognized by the town or maintained.
Right, because it's
That's
out there for passive recreation.
And the town-maintained trails are ones that we can either get grant funding or the town funds and does improvements on.
Also, I wanted to address one other issue about referencing former town administrators Hayden's vision about building several municipal buildings on the property. And back in 1968, when he made that statement in the papers, he was not looking at the northern section, which is parcel C of the monastery land. He was actually looking at this area.
So I'm not sure where they got their information. I don't know where you're getting your information. I don't know what's right.
Okay, I can send it to you.
Let's just move on.
You
That's
have
all
my
I have
email?
now.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Tom, I am on the MBA. I think there's a question that we haven't really asked, which is we are overturning this easement for the 10 acres. Does that strip the easement off of all 525 acres?
It can.
I don't think it necessarily has to. Because they can, like, they imposed it, so they can write it any way they want.
But if we're at the point.
They
where
could
we
subdivide it,
can-
make it a separate lot. There's a lot of things they can do.
Imposing all of that.
But-
The mayor has, stated at previous meetings, he's attended, I believe, 2 of these meetings, that, if the monastery land was, or a portion of it was recommended and built upon for a public safety committee, he would do everything he can to continue the conservation easement on the rest of the land in perpetuity for, I think, he's thinking at least another 20, 30 years, so that nothing else would happen on any of the other land, but as Tom said, you can really do anything, you can make it last longer, you can add more conservation land. I think that's.
The reason I'm asking that is because I think there's a larger story here that it's starting to come out, which is we're looking for a central location, not just for a safety complex building, but for a new town hall, for other buildings, a new senior center. So my question is, once this protection is gone, what is stopped? I think there's also a road that's in the comprehensive plan going straight through the monastery. Where does this end is really the question. And to portray people in this room as a special interest group and people abutting that land, I think people get that there's a bigger story here.
Tom, not to do a Q&A here, but I actually looked at that map this morning. I think you're referring to the future land use map. It actually shows transportation utility corridors in the same color, which you may have looked and saw it. It was a road going through the monastery. That's actually the utility corridor.
There's actually a statement in the conservation plan that says, comprehensive plan that says, proposes a road going from Angel to the monastery, connecting the two. Page 38.
It's still in draft, so it can be removed or edited.
Well, it can be edited, but the point is, it speaks to a larger story here, which is, once this land is unprotected, divided, split up, it's gone.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, agreed.
That's why we're here. And that's really why the MPA was formed. 10 acres is 10 acres, but 500 acres, it's a different story.
Go ahead.
These meetings are some of the most important meetings in the history of this town. We've seen a lot of things go. There was a bond on Abbott Run Valley Road, was where the first town council meeting was held in 17 whatever. But that was destroyed by developers who just come in and rape the land. They didn't care. There was historic studies and things on it, and it's just too bad that we've got to this point, and I really haven't heard anything about the neighborhoods tonight, and about the people that live in the neighborhoods. We have to live with this mess that's out there from 3 to 7 in the morning. The traffic's unbelievable, and now you're gonna open up that part. I also wanna say one thing about the trails in this area you're talking about. We are very lucky that we have a bunch of guys that get out there and make those trails perfect. You can go in this area and go all over the place. And I know a lot of those guys are right back there, and they work at this thing. This is not something. These things have to be respected. And don't forget, next time around, it's up to the voters again. And the town council at that point voted against it, and the town council voted to put restrictions on this property because one of the mayors way back then was gonna put motorcycle trails all through the monastery. And the people didn't want it, and they don't want this thing. This is the monastery. Would you tear apart Central Park? Would you go up to Boston Commons and take 12 acres? I don't think so. So we're leaving it up to you people. And by the way, I appreciate what you're doing, but I know your hands are tied. You're told what you can look at, what you can see, and everything is handed to you, and you have to just kind of pick stuff up. But ultimately, it's all going back to the monastery, which was the intent right in the beginning, and this is a holdover from the last administration, let's face it. Here's your opportunity to be heroes. Here's your chance.
Can I correct one thing you said?
Yes, please do.
Our charge is to make recommendations to the mayor. We're not the ones who are gonna decide where this thing goes.
Yeah, I know
It's
that.
the
I'm
mayor
sorry that
and the
if I
town
implied
council.
that. You guys are
So,
plugging away.
once the
We know.
recommendations are made,
Yeah, I know, and I feel
Not
happy.
me.
I feel like you shouldn't even get into it because it's kind of a pain. But it's a very emotional thing for everybody in this room.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, thank you for your time.
thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Gus Oud, and I wanted to speak in support of that gentleman over there. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. Attrition is the problem. That's the big problem in this whole thing. You start taking off little pieces, pretty soon before you know it, the whole thing is gone.
Yep.
Remember, this thing has to be saved in perpetuity, and that's a long time. And you start chipping away at it, it's gone. The other thing I would like to point out is that I've been at one of Kim's presentations. It was at the Land and Water Conservation Summit. I highly recommend you listen to it. I assume it's about the same as what I heard. There's a lot of good information there. So I was hoping we'd hear it tonight, but not so. One last thing, actually two things. I'm not an abutter. I'm a taxpayer. I live up in the northeast corner by the reservoir, and I care about the monastery. It's not just the abutters.
Yep.
Last thing, just because something is possible doesn't mean it should be done.
Yeah.
Regardless. Thank you.
I have a question about one of the maps that you just showed.
Could you,
Oh, Kevin Kelly.
Kevin? Yep.
It was the map that you pointed out the post office.
Yes.
I don't know, can you call that back up?
Yep.
Sure.
That was your map, right, the red one?
And again, I did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you pointed out the post office in the red area is the 10 acres that you're,
The red area is a little more than 10,
A little more.
closer to 14,
Okay,
but,
It's closer to 14. But so, since we're all familiar with the post office there,
yep.
that area you're looking at is more than everything from the post office, which would include Dave's parking lot, Dave's market, the gas station, that new whatever is being built in the corner. Also, everything across the street as well. So the rescue chief, do you need that much?
No,
That much land?
what I
think
said
it's just used as a
earlier
landmark.
was,
Well, no, I know, but I mean, I'm pointing out that that's quite, we're all familiar with that area. That much land, I mean, this was the third best solution that was recommended.
Well, I think the
was
chairman will certainly answer to, what, again, what the job of this committee was to do, is to seek out property that was going to fit a criteria that the mayor had said somewhere between 6 and 10 acres. So this, using the post office is simply as a landmark, because
No, I
many
know,
people
but
know the landmark, and that was also brought up in a study that was done by,
Yep.
Joe Fleming,
Okay,
back in
so-
2013.
But the best solution was building a new police station and refurbishing 2 rescue stations, which, Mr. Hefner mentioned that we already own the land.
I don't think that the
Monastery.
refurbishing of the rescue, the current facility, the headquarters located at 1512 Mendon Road was actually ever brought up. To the best of my knowledge, we discussed that, in that space, if we were to modify both facilities as they presently stand, the rescue facility at 1512 Mendon and as well as the police station, neither of those buildings are ADA compliant, so we'd be looking at millions of dollars to go ahead and, refurb each of those buildings. The site they're on, we're crammed in space right now, and, there are many, what's the term I'm looking for? Regulations that we don't meet in today's, by today's standard. In 1980, when they were placed into that facility, to my belief, or, 1984, somewhere thereabouts, as best I can tell from some of the paper clippings that I've seen, that was to be a temporary facility. In 2006, we actually, prior to my tenure in the rescue department, as director of the service, they looked at the drop zone to be an alternative site for Rescue 1 headquarters, which is currently located at the 1512 Mendon Road address. That met resistance. So, here we are today, again, defining the public safety facility, and we're talking about the public safety facility as it came out. Some of the discussion came out as a result of the merging of the fire districts and defining, what would be suitable for the town. And, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about a public safety facility to include police, fire, and EMS. When Chief Damaris and I had approached, at that time, the 2 fire chiefs, both Brian Giacone as well as Ken Finley, one of those parties said, no, I'm not interested. And at which point we went back to the mayor, expressed their desires, and here we are talking about police and EMS.
Right, but
So
it
do
still
I
wasn't
think, I don't think we need 13.76 acres as suggested by what you see here in the red.
But we also don't need 1 building.
But I don't think that
Excuse me, Sean.
the referendum makes reference to 2 buildings. I think it makes reference to
Our charge as a committee from the mayor was to find 6 to 10 acres for a public safety complex that included police and EMS. And that's what that did.
So, like Mr. Hefner mentioned, you recommend changing the easement to let the town build not only the public safety complex, but also a senior center and the town hall and a school. And so that's what he's recommending. So why can't you guys recommend doing what the commission or the study originally said was the best solution? I mean, we built this huge public health facility at the high school, and we have AstroTurf. I mean, the town spends money for better solutions, for better equipment, for better everything. I have a brother and a sister who are both police officers, I hope that training isn't the third best training or the.
No, I would suggest, I mean, you know,
third best
as far as the
equipment.
rescue service is concerned, I think that in my tenure, you would see that there's been a significant turnover in equipment and certainly training and identifying in the previous meeting that we're one of two considered, you know, true paramedic level services, which is the highest level pre-hospital training that you could have. You don't see nurses and doctors on our ambulances. However, in that space, you know, that study that we speak of, Don Jacob report, the initial study and the initial presentation talked about a 3-station model going straight up to town. Afterwards, as the report was completed, we talked about 3 optimal locations. One location being roughly where the Valley Falls Station or the Lonsdale Station is. Okay, thank you, sir. And then, but in that space, we also, you know, we looked at the current location, North Cumberland, we also looked at Cumberland Hills. In that report, there was some discussion about moving the buildings, you know, somewhere between 2 to 8/10 of a mile, you know, either east or west, you know, which really didn't make sense financially, of course, so we said, okay. At which point we talked about fire response times and not EMS response times, and we talked about 3-station models in that space. It was suggested in the last meeting that perhaps, you know, if we use that 3-station model, that maybe we go ahead and add a third rescue. And I can tell you, based upon call volume does not support that, so as part of the business model, it's not the best decision. We still want to maintain the current standard. That is, nationwide, the current standard is to roughly 80% of the time, maybe 90% of the time, I'd like to see it higher, meet a 6 to 8 minute response time townwide. Now, when we talk about a centralized location, you know, or any location for that matter, you know, would I take both vehicles and put them into a new building? Well, not if we're north on Mendon Road, not if we're down here on High Street or Diamond Hill, you know, but if we're closer to the center of the town, I may have a deployment strategy that suggests that we go from the center out. Now, that makes sense, rather than out in, because hypothetically, if I had a truck in the Lonsdale area, or the Lonsdale portion of the town, or which is perceived as Valley Falls Fire District, and also in Cumberland Hill, there is the potential that, you know, going south or going north, given what, you know, whatever time of day it may be, their response times are going to exceed 8 minutes. In a cardiac arrest scenario, it's not good. So we talk about these things, and I can't really determine what my deployment strategy is until we decide on a location, at which point I can modify my deployment strategy, and I can also talk about building a system, a delivery system for EMS to include first responders that will benefit the town. And I'm capable of doing that because that's what I do.
So you base your deployment strategy
On location of the location of the building.
Right.
So I'm quite confident that if we had a building somewhere other than this parcel of land, that I could define where we could go.
So you can do it then?
We could.
Okay.
You know, and you know, but again, I have to be able to be flexible in that space. You know, but again, as the chairman would suggest, that we need to have an open mind, right? And I think all too often what happens when we discuss things, you know, sometimes there are, you know, there's this, right? There are the flyers go on, and that can wreak havoc. It can absolutely wreak havoc. Now, as Tom suggests, you know, 10 acres doesn't seem to be a whole lot, and I understand the concern.
Looks like a lot on that map.
Well, it does, but if you shrink that map, and I don't know if Josh has the ability to do that.
I'm only talking about it in relative, I'm talking about it relative to everything from the post office, on the opposite side of the road, everything from the post office, all the way to Bear Hill Road. You're 10, a little more.
Excuse me, we're gonna move on. I've got other people that want to speak. Yes, sir.
Can you state your name for the meeting minutes?
Please?
Can you state your name for the
Yes,
minutes?
Dave Raymond from Linden Road.
What was your last name?
Raymond.
Raymond, thank you.
In the $12.5 million for the bond issue, is there any money in there technically to purchase property?
No.
So that is a limitation in itself, correct?
It's a consideration.
Right.
It's not a limitation.
Number two, a suggestion for a possible site that would have to be discussed amongst you people. Valley Falls Fire Station has property facing it to the right, a home, and then property owned by the town to the left of the home, correct?
I don't know.
All right. I was told it does.
Are you referring to the baseball field?
Yeah, town owns the baseball field, the station, the house is private, and then there's a vacant lot next to it. In your plans, could that property, which is public and maybe for a nominal fee purchased home, be a location to the complex? Future thought, all right?
It's south of the box.
Correct, but, I mean, a police station could be anywhere in the community, right? Because
Yes.
they patrol. Fire stations are fixed locations, response times as stated. Now, in the paper, it states in the future, they're thinking of municipalizing the fire district into a municipal department. Thus, you can train all your personnel to be ALS. You could run engines and ladders as ALS vehicles for first responders, and that window of 6 to 8 minutes could be diminished, correct?
Well, you know, again, you can define levels of ALS too, so you could make reference to the EMT cardiac and current rules and regulations that are offered by the state of Rhode Island suggest that the EMT cardiac curriculum is going away beginning of 2016.
Correct.
So now we'd be looking at taking current personnel and training them to the paramedic level, which, you know, if you look at the national standard curriculum and the way COAMS is commissioned on it, accreditation for the EMS provider, they're pushing it to be a degree program. There's a chair of a department that's being developed at New England Institute of Technology. That program's gonna cost about $35,000 to $40,000 for an associate's level degree, minimally. So in that space, we're talking about a significant amount of money, okay, to increase the level of training if you want all ALS, okay? The current EMT cardiacs that are present within the fire district would be grandfathered, okay? That's the current plan, right? By the state, and we find that through rules and regulations, through the Office of Emergency Medical Services. But again, we're talking about a system.
Yes.
We're not here to define system. I could discuss this all day long.
Yes.
I mean, this, I would love to. I mean, if you have it, I like to talk. I really do. I mean, I don't get out much. Okay? But the fact of the matter is that this is a passion of mine. It truly is. And my passion is to make sure that when this is done, wherever this building goes, is that we have a system in place that is going to benefit every member of this town, every member or any person in this room, and any member of this town, and any person visiting the town, coming in to visit their loved ones, or going to work, or just passing through. So, and at that point,
walk the monastery, it's a beautiful place.
Just
You want to
Thank
have.
May I suggest in the future you get a microphone so we can hear you? Right? I mean, I don't know if it's possible, we hear the library personnel all the time from the meeting, but if you guys could rig up a microphone, I think it's curious to the rest of us.
I can certainly look into that for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is John Cullen. I live in Lincoln, born in Berkeley, lived in Cumberland, and really talk about passion, have a passion for the monastery. I'm going to try to keep this within 5 minutes because I know people run on. But I'd like to say that we as a community, Cumberland community, and people who have lived in Cumberland, moved out of Cumberland, you know, made a commitment, and this commitment goes back really over 100 years. And it's been really, I believe, codified, and it's been a promise made to the citizens in the past, the present, and the future to keep the monastery as contemplative and as passive. I want to say that my great-grandfather, this was the Amasa Whipple farm, this whole area here, and it was bought by my great-grandfather in 1888, and you can check this out, Book 40 on page 181. And the reason being is because Bishop Hawkins wanted to bring a contemplative order to this area right here. Actually, it was a seminary first. And then he changed his mind. So the property was bought in 1888 by my great-grandfather, who deeded it 14 days later to Bishop Hawkins. And Bishop Hawkins asked the Cistercians in Nova Scotia to come down here in the Lady of the Valley here to establish a monastery, which they did. It's been contemplative because of the Diocese of Providence, you know, since 1900, when the Cistercians first came down with 7 monks. Then we know we had the fire. We had the huge fire in the early 1950s, and the Cistercians left, and now they're in Spencer, Mass. But who came in its place were the Graymore Fathers. The Graymore Fathers came, and in the same aspect and tradition of the Cistercians, it was a contemplative area here up until the about 1970 area, where they decided that they were going to move to they were gonna move to Garrison, New York. And we know development was gonna take place. And Mr. Hayden stepped in, and I knew Mr. Hayden back in the late 60s and the early 70s. And I think maybe research could be done, but I know Mr. Hayden was not only the first town administrator of Cumberland, he was the first engineer. So what he wanted, from my understanding, but the research could be made to see exactly what Mr. Hayden's words were, well, as far as what was in his mind. A lot of people have been saying what was in his mind, but what was his words? But you take a look at his actions, and his actions were not to have residential development, not to have development. So if he, as an engineer, he knew what he was buying for the town of Cumberland and preserving for the town of Cumberland, and it was to stop development. So does that mean it was just residential development, or did that mean municipal development? All development, to keep it as the Cistercians, the Greymoors, and I believe in Mr. Hayden's vision was to keep it contemplative, to keep it passive. So what I want to say is that this really shouldn't even be on the table, because in 2004, the town council said they wanted to codify what Mr. Hayden did, back in the early 70s, is that let's protect this property, all of this property, and not to really have segments of it to eat away, as far as development. So, in just ending here is that there's been a promise made. A promise should be kept. This property should not be for consideration here.
Amen.
Thank you.
Roger Brosnan on High Street. We all know that the mayor appointed this company. And we know a few meetings ago, the mayor came and I believe at the time, 2 meetings ago, I think it was, when the mayor came and gave some introductory remarks. Did he not, I thought I heard him say at that meeting that he would not consider any property under 10 acres. Does anybody else remember that? Am I remembering incorrectly? So I've heard it said several times tonight that this committee's mandate is to 6 to 10 acres. Is it 6 to 10 acres, or is it nothing less than 10?
As far as I'm concerned, it's 6 to 10 acres. I won't speak for the rest of the committee.
So I also heard Mr. Mutter tonight say that this committee has no legal standing. Is that correct? Well,
It's an advisory committee.
My understanding of the background of how this committee came about was back in last year when the big meeting happened that the town council voted, and there's members of the public speaking against putting the monastery property on a referendum on the ballot. Voted, in fact, put it on a referendum on the ballot. A few days later, they had an emergency meeting and they voted to take it back off. Ostensibly, that was to ensure that when the vote came to approve the $12 million bond, that this highly political, highly emotional issue was not going to get in the way of that. I think that's fair to say. At the time, Jeff Kearns, who was on the town council at the time, wrote a letter to Mayor McKee that was quoted in the August 4th Valley Breeze article. He said, "I firmly request, in lieu of placing the aforementioned resolution on the ballot, that you form a safety conflict site selection committee. This new committee, in my opinion, will serve as equivalent to a town-wide vote to approve or disqualify the monastery site." So my question right now is that, and the mayor's not here for me to ask him that tonight, is that what the mayor believes that with this site, what this committee sends up to him as the recommendation, that will represent the same thing as a town-wide vote? I'm taking this promise.
Again, I'm not going to speak for the mayor, but my interpretation of what he's told us is no. He has asked us for recommendations for sites, now plural, And that's what we plan on doing, and after that, it's up to him working with the town council to determine where this thing goes. We don't have the power to do that.
Sir, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dan Bedondi. A lot of people don't know, the history long before the colonists arrived here was Native American land. All this land was Wampanoag. This is all on record. We even got a deed by George Washington himself, our chief does, for all this land. But however, my people wish to have this land preserved, and we speak for all the Cumberland residents here. But the other thing too, we have a thing in this country called the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. We the people, all right? These people here, the mayor or the town people, don't make the decisions. You people make the decisions. You tell them, we're not asking you to stop the project here. We're telling you, plain and simple. We don't want these people to, think they're our bosses. They work for us. They could be voted out, plain and simple. So everybody here that doesn't want the monastery to be touched, you need to raise your voices to the mayor and to the town council and everybody else. Say, listen, we're not asking you. We're telling you, plain and simple. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt it.
It's all right. Happy to yield for a moment, but still a little more I was hoping that Mr. Hefner was gonna hang around, because I did wanna ask him also, because all this, his legal reasoning that he represented tonight, it sounds to me that he's saying that it's legally impossible for the town to protect any of its property in perpetuity thing. That seems, again, I think this gentleman over here brought up the example of Boston Common, of Central Park, places that were put into I don't know what the correct word is, but into a public trust. Obviously, can you imagine what would happen? I mean, this is our Central Park.
Exactly.
Can you imagine what would happen in Central Park or in Boston if somebody, if a group of, or a mayor or whoever, who, let's face it, public officials are transient public officials. They represent us, but they're only here for a very short period of time. We're talking about something here that goes beyond that.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Evans. One of the things I'm just taking a look at this parcel that we have up here is if anybody's seen the traffic on Diamond Hill Road on Saturday or just name it, right? I think we're gonna have to put 4 lanes right from High Street all the way, how far, you have to go across the bridge, you'd have to widen the bridge at that point. I don't think the demands up there would even allow, would it, to have quick access out of that area? What happens, if you're at rush hour?
He turns a light and a siren on, and he's got a tremendous advantage that the rest of us don't have.
Yeah, but when you're backed up, in there, I don't know who you're gonna drive over.
Well, the only comment I have on that is they do it in downtown Boston, and they do it in downtown New York City, so it's not convenient. And believe me, I live off Bay Hill Road, and I work in the industrial park up at the northern end of town, and I don't even get on 295 anymore. I come up Mendon Road, I cut down Nate Whipple Highway and in the back way. So I try to avoid that corner. I've been stuck as much as anybody's been stuck, so I certainly appreciate that line of reasoning. I do understand that the DOT is currently looking at the 295 interchange. I don't know exactly what it encompasses right now. The thing I've never been able to understand is, I don't think this town has grown substantially over the past 10 or 15 years. As far as I can remember, it's always been 30-something thousand people. Yet there's 10,000 more cars. So the economy must be good. I'm gonna ask you to wait until other people who want to speak.
Yeah, people have spoken.
Go ahead.
Speak up a little, I can't hear you.
Annette Tebow Julio. I have a proposed site for the police station. What about right across the street between North Garden and Rowland? That whole section is for sale. We could level the current police station, park the cars there. But there's even another lot across from there. That's for sale. Right, sale.
Johnny Bill's Auto Parts.
It's where, is it Jolly's?
Yes.
It's for sale.
Suggestion was closing North Garden Street.
I got you.
If it's the area we think you're talking about, we have already discussed that and voted it down. Size, I believe.
There was a discussion about North Garden Street, about closing North Garden Street and using that whole property. We felt that the neighborhood would not be real pleased if we said we were gonna shut your street down.
Well, why would they shut the street down? Put the building between Rowland and North Cumberland, and then you have the parking across the street where the current building is. You need it even more land by the one across from
Are
Rowland.
you talking about the one on the other side of High Street? The one that's empty, used to have a...
Jolly Solution.
Yeah. Where the gas station is.
Road's
right
right,
now.
that's for sale.
We also didn't want to deal with
Check
that.
into across the street from there, which there's a little shack there. And there's big empty
It's one in one year after the other. They gotta do what they want.
We're not gonna put that back on the agenda. Is there anybody in the back?
Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to say anything?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I think I sent you an email I was on vacation.
What's your name, sir?
Ron Gravlin, Bender Road. I suggested some land, and I'm not gonna bring up the name because it's privately owned. I know you've walked it. Haven't you, Mr. Chairman, you told me?
I did not walk it, and I didn't tell you that I walked it. I can see a good portion of it.
All right, you saw it from the road.
I think somebody else said they walked it.
Well, whatever. Is that part, and maybe you don't have to answer me, but is that part of the mayor's idea of still contacting that individual?
I don't believe that he's pursuing that. I can certainly check into it.
For what reason? There is land there, because I'll tell you why. I have a very good friend who is owning a lot of land out of town. He is looking to purchase it, to build, own it. He's not running a lot of trouble. He's told me that personally. But I don't see why he can't look into it. Ask him about land and construction area. That's ridiculous, in my opinion. I've lived in this town almost 60 years. I can tell you now, that is not the place to go. This town has been a piecemeal as long as you know. It's landlocked. You don't know where to go. I sympathize with all you people. But I'll tell you, I don't know why you haven't looked at that. And it could be pretty. You know what? This gentleman is right. It is not free. You can pay for it. In lieu of some taxes, I've come up with an idea to told you about it. And I've talked to Josh about it. Has it been looked into?
It's all right.
We can talk after the meeting. I know you're talking.
Did we already?
Yeah, put it on the agenda.
We can't put things on the agenda until somebody has made contact with the property owner. I guess there are privacy issues. I mean, like I said, I have one person who told me not to, because he doesn't want to scare away tenants that he has right now, so.
Yeah, I mean, that has been the approach this committee has taken, not to put forth a piece of private property that the private property owner has not given us the consent to discuss in a meeting.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you haven't talked to this gentleman, I don't know whether you have or not. But I'll tell you.
I haven't personally, because I'm not the one that approaches these people.
The mayor's office has reached out to any private property owner that's been suggested on behalf of the committee.
Hi, I'm Lydia McDermott from Walter Shaken Place. So,
You did fine last time.
I love the monastery, and I like hiking and walking and learning. And it's really difficult to do that in a town like that because there's sidewalks as we go. And when there are sidewalks, they're on very busy streets, and I know people have gotten killed and people have gotten seriously injured. There's an area called Blue Hills in Milton, Mass. It's gorgeous. And when I discovered the monastery, I was so proud of this gorgeous oasis that we had in the middle of town. That to go explore, and you walk down the paths, and there's like a room that you walk into. It's like a room. You walk in there and you go, wow, look at this. It's just unbelievably beautiful. Like nothing you've seen really like this somewhere else. Then you walk down another path and there's just ferns everywhere, and there's just like all kinds of flowers and butterflies and everything. You walk down another path. There's all this brush where like deer are hiding and raising new ones. And then it opens up into this rocky area, and you can see where an old farmhouse, the remains of a foundation was. And I go to the woods over here that you're speaking of. And it's very wooded and it's quiet, except for when you come down to the town, the street, and you start to hear the traffic. And I say, wow. If I'm walking up 9 Min Street, and that is developed into a town center or a safety complex, my buffer is gone from the sound. And I think it's a very important buffer. Not only just the buffer, it's a great place to hike, and it can do more exploring. And I really, really wish it would just be left alone as it is. Even if you build a safety complex, and a jogging trail, you really don't need to improve nature. It's there, it's beautiful, and I think that the town should be proud of it as is, and maybe get stewards for the land and bring in children to learn about the environment and the ecosystems, because they're all very different when you walk. It's amazing. It's just like it's different everywhere you go in that monastery. It's gorgeous. And there is some wetlands. I don't know if they're DEM certified, but there's vernal pools that run. It runs the middle of this brook. You can see it. There's a blue line for some wetlands there. I found salamanders there a week ago. There's life in that brook, and there's an aquifer that feeds it, probably from Longbrook across Angel Road. So I don't know if you're going to have an issue with DEM with that, but it does exist. I have photos of it. My dog likes to drink out of it. So it kind of concerns me, Anyway, I just want you all know it's an amazing place.
Thank you.
We have a new one over here.
Oh. Ladies first. Is that okay?
Are you sure?
We'll get to you next.
My name's Alexandra Curran. I guess I just want to say that I'm disappointed Mr. Hefner didn't stay around for his legal questions as he promised he would. I'd also like to ask a couple questions about the procedure of this committee. Your cutoff is June 15th, correct? You have to disband on June 15th.
That's a deadline for making the recommendation.
That we were provided for
making
making
the
recommendations is
Okay,
June
so if you
15th.
don't hear back from the Attorney General by then, you're going to have to vote on whether to recommend the monastery property before you hear anything from the Attorney General, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I was just wondering about there seems to be some confusion or maybe just being vague about the procedure of how a site is eventually going to be selected. I know that you guys don't have power to say this is going to be the site. I know you're just giving recommendations. I think Jeff, or maybe it was you mentioned that the mayor is going to have to then work with the town council to determine what the correct site will be out of the sites that you guys recommend.
I believe it was said, I don't know that it was
Does
myself.
anyone know exactly what the procedure is going to be, how a site is actually going to be selected? I mean, is the town council going to vote on it, or are we going to vote on it?
Does the town council have to vote on it? I mean,
My opinion? My opinion? If I make sure I'm okay.
Your opinion is as good as
My
anybody
opinion
else's.
that the council will have to approve it. I disagree with the person, but this committee could come up with no answer. This is part of my frustration here, is that, how many are on the committee? 11. So there's gonna be a 6-5 vote, there's gonna be six votes of something. It could be to recommend no site. It could be, it's your problem, man. There's a whole bunch of things that could happen. Everybody jumps to these conclusions. And Mr. Cullen, actually, he wouldn't need us to have to consider if it wasn't for the old form ordinance, right? So he wouldn't even, if that wasn't there, and that wasn't protecting the property, you could have, and, you know, so that's why the motion to go and ask for, to clarify that, because I think it is a bigger picture. Someone said it, you, right? I mean, because if the answer is no, everybody can calm down, right? And there's a lot to be learned from that no, and as you go down the road. So a lot of things can happen. This committee could come back and say, you know, we can't pick one. We don't like any of them. And that's that, and then it's back to the mayor. Now, if we do, it's my opinion that the mayor would have to pick a spot, and that would have to be endorsed by the council. You know, that's how it works. You can't just pick a spot, and so, but there's a lot between, and so there's the deadline, the self-imposed deadline is June 15th. That could come and go. There's no world, there's sun will come up on the 16th, whatever, right? It matters, it really, these people here, you know, what the decision is, and then it moves on, but I know everybody has all these opinions about so many things that, you know, it's a little frustrating, sitting here, you know, listening to them, but in any event, that's the procedure would be, a lot can happen here, it could mean nothing, it could mean everything. You pick the spot that we suggest, one of them, and it could get passed. Even if it comes back and the Attorney General says it's highly unlikely, if one day you've got 4 people on the town council who thought otherwise, they could amend the 04 ordinance, and all the legislation part of it at any given time, maybe not now, maybe not in 2 years, it could happen. So, I mean, part of even my interest to ask the Attorney General is to know, you know, because maybe and that gentleman said, maybe the best thing protecting the property is public opinion. It might be good enough, but for us to consider a site, we need to know if it's in play. We're still trying to figure that out, but who knows what's on the minds of the 11 people? I mean, maybe there won't be a consensus, maybe there will be, but you have to let it play out.
But it doesn't matter.
I think it would matter if you're sitting on the council, and as many of the councilors have been here, and you witnessed it, that's gonna be part of your mindset. I would think you're getting a chance to have public hearings, in front of public hearings. But, let's put it this way, if it gets to the town council, the mayor, and everything happens, and it lands on the town council's docket, you're gonna have a chance there.
that's the place. I mean, we could vote it up or down, we could vote it up, but it doesn't, they still have to okay it. So they have the final say. It would have to come from us, not you.
No,
So Jeff,
The idea you might want.
the eventual summation is, just goes to the town's elected officials, either way.
Right.
That's the recommendation they're going to them.
I know, I think my whole point with asking the question was to, I guess, suggest that you guys not rush through this process. I know that this deadline is June 15th. I mean, Jeff says, I guess it doesn't matter. The sun's gonna come up on June 16th. But I would say, I would encourage you guys to get the opinion of the Attorney General before you make any concrete decisions about the monastery, because I'm not all that confident in Mr. Hefner's opinion on this matter, because he kind of rushed out of here, wasn't really willing to answer any of the questions. So I would just hope that you guys don't rush through this process, although I guess it doesn't matter because it's going to go to the town council anyway.
I think about it, we put this much time into it.
This isn't our first meeting.
More that gentleman's been waiting.
Yes. Where?
Oh, I'm still there, I haven't left like the attorney. My name is Mike Bode, reside along Nate Whipple Highway. I'd first like to thank the committee, because again, it's your time, I can come here, shoot holes in it, spend all the time, greatly appreciate it. Nate Whipple Highway, if you know the history, 60 years ago was Sneech Pond Road, rural community. Now it's Nate Whipple Highway, which is a version of Indianapolis 500. So that's people call that progress. I have another word which I will not mention tonight, that progress. I belong to the Cumberland Land Trust, and I'm not here as a representative of that, but one of our goals is to tie in property from Diamond Hill all the way to the monastery property. We do not, hopefully, we do not have a detour with Dunkin' Donuts or a town hall or something else interfering with it. So I hope, again, that we can preserve this land. Regarding Chief Damaris, I know he needs a better building. However, Chief, I think the police force is made up of people, not buildings. And I think we have an excellent police department as it is now. Whether you're in a shack or anything else, we have some excellent people. I know a lot of the guys on the force, and I think we have one of the finest departments in the state. So I congratulate you on that. And just write some notes over here. And in essence, the faster an area grows economically and demographically, the greater are the demands on the remaining forests and undeveloped lands. The attempt to maintain this growth results in the decline of the community. It's my hope that we break out of the cycle of deforestation that has undermined early communities. If you just read your history and see how a lot of communities have declined, it's through because they attacked the forest. American Revolution, one of the causes is deforestation. Read your history about this thing. That's decline. Now that doesn't mean Cumberland's going to close down and rebuild this. However, that shows that's an indication for our priorities. And also, our children what our priorities are. So our priorities to maintain a place like this or build more buildings, put another Dunkin' Donuts, put Walmarts over here. I know what my priorities are. I live on a lot of acreage, and I'm going to keep it like that, give it to my son, and hopefully he's going to give it to his son after that. So that's my goal, and this is why we moved in here over 40 years ago, to retain the character of this. And finally, let us not change the character of the land. Let us not change the character and charm of Cumberland. Do not build on this land. Thank you.
Yeah.
One more. If you can make it quick.
I'll make it very,
There you go.
We'll see.
Yeah, in a minute.
By the way, Senator Jack Reed just got $8.25 million to purchase and preserve open space and support wildlife conservation. I wonder what Jack would say about this, Travis. $8.5 million to preserve open space. This is out of the Providence Journal, May 1st, 2015. I think we should follow Jack's lead.
Thank you.
That's the relative, I'll have to talk to him.
One more. Go ahead.
I just want to say on behalf of the Monastery Preservation Alliance, a huge thank you to everyone who showed up in support of saving our monastery land. And,
Save the monastery.
I'm sorry. I absolutely think that he captured what the monastery is to all of us, to almost all of us who are here, and that is that this is our second park. And I love that idea, and I hope you don't mind if I use it. I think it perfectly captures what this property is all about. And I hope the town makes the right decision.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Thank you, everybody.